Hi, Kay. How are you tonight? I can see you. You can't see me yet. I'll be there before you know it. Just take a moment to share, if you don't mind. And I'll be right with you. Okay, that should just about do it. If someone will share to the All Friends group for me, and maybe send an invitation to Deborah Wilson, that will be very helpful. I am going to be here in the flesh, as it were. Not really in the flesh, but you know what I mean. Well, hi, I'm glad to see you all here tonight. And Independent Left News, nice to see you. Kay, it's wonderful to see you. Steve Wolfbrandt, great to see you. Again, Deborah Wilson's already here. Hi, Deborah, great to see you. And I know there are a good many others of you here. In case, as far as the rule changes go, it could be helpful for sure. Okay. Before we get into the rule changes, I want to cover a little bit of news that seemed to me to be noteworthy. But we'll get into the rules changes fairly quickly. First, we begin by sharing an odd experience reflected in this article by Julia Connolly, the New Year's Eve celebrations. By the way, everybody, Happy New Year. Anyway, the New Year's Eve celebrations got some attention from Bonnie and I. We went to YouTube, of course, and we looked at the New Year's Eve celebration in New York City, and we thought it was really eerie and ghostly. The long shot showed very few people there, and of course, that was all to the good, but it was really weird, really weird. Then they shifted to Sydney, and you can see all the fireworks in Sydney, Australia. Fantastic, going through fireworks. And some people there, you can see some people, but it's not really densely packed. The caption says it's a near empty Sydney Opera House in the forecourt during New Year's Eve celebrations. Why? Because, of course, everybody's afraid of the new contagious coronavirus variant, and they're being very careful. As the clock struck 12 midnight in Sydney, Australia, the city's usual fireworks display was cut to just 7 minutes. And instead of gathering at the iconic Sydney Opera House, most residents watched the event on the television. So that's basically what happened. The BBC reported it also. Precautions were taken despite Australia's relatively low number of COVID-19 cases, but Sydney reported 90 cases last week connected with an outbreak in its Northern Beaches region. The outbreak prompted state governments in Australia to ban travel from the capital of New South Wales. So, Australia already had to take action to try to make sure they had any possible spread from the new variant under control. But it was still, when you looked at the YouTube showing Sydney, it looked like there were people there who were enjoying themselves, and it represented a welcome contrast from the New York view. But there were some countries, including New Zealand, where life has returned largely to normal after the government increased healthcare spending early on in the pandemic and instituted strict lockdown measures, largely eliminating the virus. As you know, only 5 deaths per million in New Zealand compared to 35 in Australia, and compared to right now, as of this minute, probably 1,090 or 1,091 deaths per million here in the good old US of A. And then Taiwan, where about 700 cases have been confirmed since January of 2020. In other words, over the last year. And 7 people have died of COVID-19. 7 people out of how many millions of people? There are, folks, as I've said many times on the In Depth program, 24 million inhabitants of Taiwan. And they go back and forth from mainland China on holidays and things like that. Chinese New Year's coming up. They're going to be going back and forth in large numbers. They've had only 7 people die. That is what is possible to do. That is what is humanly possible to do. And they represent the benchmark, the standard for evaluating our failure. They have 0.3 of a fatality per million. We have 1,090 fatalities per million. So we've performed more than 3,000 times worse than they have. That's the magnitude of our failure. What were they able to do in Taiwan? They were able to have big celebrations in Taiwan and act normally, because they largely got rid of the virus. Counting down, set to welcome 2021 with concerts and fireworks. Though they've scaled back some too. but life was pretty normal. Absolutely no spectators allowed in Times Square, said the New York Police Department chief. There were barriers in Madrid, while authorities in Berlin said they would punish violators consistently if they were found to be selling fireworks leading up to New Year's Eve. The annual show at the Brandenburg Gate was called off. So I thought we just ought to note that. It wouldn't take too long to note that. But had our president been someone other than Donald Trump, and maybe more similar to Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand prime minister, we might have made it through with very few deaths. And how many deaths have we had thus far? According to Worldometer, right at this moment, we have had nearly 359,000 deaths and 1,080 deaths per million. And earlier today, which essentially today's count is over, we had 2,107 deaths. 2 days ago, we had 2,220 deaths. And the day before yesterday, actually this is yesterday's total, there were 3,600 deaths, according to the Worldometer site. So that's it. We're at 2,000 and 3,000 deaths per day now, consistently. More than 60,000 per month. The vaccine is slow to get out. Things are looking terrible for January. We could probably lose another 60,000 people, folks. That's the way things sit. So to get to some other news, which in its own way is grim as well, let me share this little piece from Dave Sirota. Guess what the Democrats did? They didn't hold. They folded. Senate Democrats actually made a motion to concede on $2,000 stimulus checks. Look at that smile from Debbie Stab Me Now. And from Dick, the banks own the place, Durbin. He was condemning that way back in, I think, 1907. But I guess he's learned to smile about it a little. There's Mark Warner. He looks like someone, well, I won't say what he looks like. Tabby Baldwin there in the background. And little Chucky Schmucky in the foreground. It was always a possibility Dems would be too scared to halt a major Pentagon bill in order to help millions of Americans get $2,000 survival checks. In fact, as we wrote early this week, it was very likely they would back down the moment any bad faith critic so much as waved a flag and said, quote, support the troops, unquote. And capitulation became even more likely when Clinton-era Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who Jan Varoufakis calls the Prince of Darkness, corporate Democratic pundits and billionaire-owned elite media outlets began parroting a series of eerily similar let-them-eat-cake talking points against the survival checks, which McConnell promptly used to bludgeon proponents of the bipartisan initiative. But even appreciating all this and also knowing that many Democratic leaders still cling to an outdated austerity ideology, as we know here very well, the sheer scale of Wednesday's Democratic surrender was truly a sight to behold, and it probably ended the chance for more immediate aid to millions of Americans facing eviction, starvation, and bankruptcy. The day began with Senator Bernie Sanders following through on his promise to deny unanimous consent for the Senate to advance a $740 billion defense authorization bill. Wasn't even a funding bill. Wouldn't have given them funding anyway. It wasn't as if there was any funding delay involved. It was just an authorization bill, for God's sakes. Until Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell allows an up or down vote on legislation that would send $2,000 survival checks to individuals making less than $75,000 and couples making less than $150,000. God forbid people could get $2,000 survival checks. Sanders' move forced McConnell to ask the Senate to pass a formal motion to proceed on a defense bill, which would let Republicans move forward on the Pentagon priority without a vote on the $2,000 checks. The motion created the moment in which Democrats could have stood their ground and cornered McConnell. Instead, as the Republicans saber-rattled about the need to pass a defense bill, 41 Democrats obediently voted with McConnell, allowing him to move the defense bill forward without a vote on the checks. Now, you might ask, if there were 41 Democrats who obediently voted with McConnell, 41 out of 47, how many Republicans voted with McConnell on this bill to overturn the veto delivered by the president of the NDAA bill? Well, as you may know, the Republicans had 53 senators, and only 40 of the 53 voted for this bill. On the Democratic side, it was 41 out of 47. Because God forbid anybody should accuse the Democrats of not supporting our troops. Anyway, going on, that included yes votes from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Vice President Kamala Harris, the lead sponsor on a bill to give Americans monthly $2,000 checks during the pandemic. Yes, Chameleon was the lead sponsor on a bill to give Americans $2,000 checks during the pandemic. And she voted to cut the legs out from under Bernie, too. I wonder who told her to do that. Could it have been her president-elect? One day before her vote to help Mitch, Harris had called on the Republican leader to hold a vote on her legislation. She wanted her legislation voted on. But she still folded. I guess she wasn't really serious about wanting a vote on our legislation. Only 6 members of the Dem caucus mustered the courage to vote against McConnell's maneuver. Bernie, Warren, Chris Van Hollen. So the Vermont senator, one of the Massachusetts senators, Chris Van Hollen, okay, Maryland senator, Jeff Merkley from Oregon, Ed Markey, and Ron Wyden. 2 senators from Oregon, 2 senators from Massachusetts, 1 from Maryland, and 1 Vermont. Who is the most progressive senator in the Senate still? Well, of course, okay, it's Bernie Sanders. But who is the second most progressive? Folks, I hate to tell you, but it ain't Liz Warren. She's folding all the time. But there's Markey standing up straight, supporting Sanders. And Jeff Merkley standing up straight, supporting Bernie. I want to ask all of you, when is the last time you saw Jeff Merkley vote in a manner that Bernie did not? I think you got to go back pretty far to find that. I think the most progressive senator in the Senate, other than Bernie Sanders, is Jeff Merkley. Or maybe it's Ed Markey right now. But it certainly ain't Elizabeth Warren. That's for sure. She folds her tent far too often when the going gets tough. Democratic senators, in fact, provided the majority of the votes for the measure that lets the defense bill proceed without a vote, $2,000 check. Of course, as you know, I'm sure, the NDA passed. The veto by Trump was overridden, I should say. Cutting the legs out from Bernie's resistance. Now, whereupon he cut short his promised filibuster to only 20 minutes because there was little point to it. After that, there was no leverage to hold over Mitch anymore. The leverage was to failure to pass the NDAA bill. That was the leverage. Schumer started out by backing Bernie in this. But when push came to shove, he folded like a cheap suit. Folded like the cheap suit that he is. Now, there are many of us who've been working very hard to replace Nancy Pelosi in the House. And we'll get to that later. But certainly, we need just as much to replace little Chucky Schmucky as leader in the Senate. He's terrible. He has the backbone of a slimy invertebrate. More. Common Dreams article by Jessica Corbett. On the new year, 81 senators vote to override Trump's veto of NDAA as GOP continues to block $2,000 relief checks. This is basically a summary of what happened that was gone into in more detail by Dave Sirota. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. There's a background of Trump vetoing the NDAA override, and Bernie Sanders, one of the 13 senators who voted against the override. So notice, 6 Democrats voted against the override. I paid attention to that, but there were 7 Republicans who voted against the override too. More Republicans voted against the override than Democrats, which was, of course, the obverse of saying that more Democrats voted for the override than Republicans. Amazing, right? Amazing. There's Bernie. So Bernie was fighting, and he was talking, and he was sticking to his guns. And there was the final vote. Yay, 81, and nay, 13. And it certainly wasn't a yay moment for those who were looking for a $2,000 stimulus checks. And Dave Sirota says, for those who yelled at us yesterday and insisted Democrats were truly putting up a real fight against the GOP and for the $2,000 checks, I hope you're all watching the Senate floor vote now. He could have said, to see the end of the kabuki dance. There's a quote from the Sirota article I just went through. And Sirota put it in a Thursday interview with Crystal Ball, quote, it's a little wonky, it's a little procedural, but the point here is that the Democrats had the chance to not allow Mitch McConnell to move forward the defense authorization bill without a vote on $2,000 checks. And they ended up instead giving him 41 of the votes for that measure. It would be hilarious if it weren't pathetic, right? Pathetic. The resistance pathétique. That's what this was. The next congressional session will begin at noon on Sunday. After the speaker vote is scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow. Though party control of the Senate remains uncertain, the chamber's majority will be determined by a pair of runoff elections in Georgia on January 5th. Now, recent reports are saying that the 2 Democratic candidates have been surging in the polls and now have a lead over the Republican candidates. I don't know whether the polls are accurate or not. They may be accurate, but that doesn't mean the votes are going to reflect what the polls say, does it? Doesn't mean that at all, right? Who knows whether the vote is going to reflect what the polls say, even if the polls are accurate? Because the Republicans are doing all they can to cheat in Georgia. They have control of the machinery of the state. Now, there was a successful court case when the Democrats got back some votes, and Democratic turnout in early voting is reportedly very heavy, maybe the Democrats are going to pull it out there. But we do not know. We do not know. That's the truth. If they do pull it out, okay, the two running have cast themselves basically as Biden Democrats. Now, maybe Warnock is really a little more radical than that. I don't know. I don't know why I think so. He's a preacher. Comes from the Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin Luther King's old pulpit. Some have high hopes for him. Those hopes are not reflected in his public agenda. John Ossoff, very, very centrist. He's a skilled campaigner, good campaigner, really smart guy. There are many who consider him an empty suit. I don't know what to think. But all indications are that they are Biden Democrats, and they will dance to the tune that Biden plays. And we know that's going to be a very inadequate tune to meet the crises that we face. So let us go on to the main topic of tonight. The main topic of tonight. I will share the screen one more time. At least one more time. Maybe I'll have occasion to pull out something more official. Anyway, Paygo exemptions in House rules will help to pave the way for a Green New Deal, and Medicare for all, progressives say. This is by Julia Conley, and it was written today because that's when the news broke. It broke as people were heavily pressuring the progressives, and as a group that I was heavily involved with was pressuring the squad on Twitter to stand firm against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, to vote against her and to prevent her from getting the 218 votes, or more specifically, the majority of votes cast for Speaker that would be necessary for her to win the speakership again. I spent the last number of days, most of my time, tweeting on this, trying to get our hashtags trending so we could make the case, a case different from Jimmy Dore's, what Jimmy Dore is trying to do. So he has, of course, a campaign getting all the publicity going on. And that campaign, which has been joined by others like Bree Joy Gray and Katie Halper and the People's Party, and some other notables. They've been getting lots of play on Twitter. They had a protest, the first day of which was here today, okay, in Washington. Oh, and by the way, Joy Mann is featured as one of the people joining with them, okay, in the protest, telling her story, her very unfortunate story. Okay. And what they are doing is commanding the squad, demanding that the squad, okay, and the progressives hold their votes for Pelosi until she agrees to have a Medicare for all floor vote. Now, what we've been trying to do is a bit different, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But before I do, let's go through this news from the article. There's a picture, okay, of Alex, AOC, the darling of the left, not so long ago. And progressives on Saturday applauded House Democrats for including in the chamber's rules package for the incoming Congress 2 key exemptions from the pay-as-you-go rule, also known as Paygo, which could cut down on roadblocks keeping lawmakers from passing far-reaching health care and climate action laws. So, you may know that Paygo requires that when you put in a bill, that it pass a test. And the test is that the Budget Committee in the House has to do estimates, which it normally does with the assistance of the CBO, in order to evaluate whether the legislation on a 10-year basis will be neutral from the standpoint of the deficit. Okay. And if it is not neutral, then it is not allowed to get out of the Rules Committee. It's not allowed to get out of the Budget Committee and go to the floor for a floor vote. That's how Paygo works. Now, there are all kinds of legislation that get exceptions from the Paygo rule. For example, military appropriations often get exemptions, okay, from the Paygo rule. And other things like tax cuts favored by lawmakers get exemptions from the Paygo rules. A favorite, okay, of the Republicans was to suspend Paygo while they were in office. Then when the Democrats come back in, Nancy Pelosi immediately clamps down on the Paygo rules so she can have austerity to control the progressives in her caucus from getting too obstreperous, I think, or too successful. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Rules Committee Chairman McGovern unveiled an updated rules package which would exempt bills, quote, to prevent, prepare for, or respond to economic or public health consequences, unquote, of the COVID-19 pandemic or of the climate crisis from being subjected to Paygo. So bills like that wouldn't involve the Paygo test anymore. They just could put in the legislation and argue for it on the merits. Now, this is seen as a big concession. And why? Because any climate emergency bills, Green New Deal bills, whether they're called Green New Deal bills or not, but parts of the Green New Deal, just transitions to the Green New Deal, those bills would be exempt. With respect to COVID, the bills designed to provide economic relief from COVID would be exempt from Paygo, so we could have deficit spending with respect to those bills. The same with COVID bills that involve public health consequences with respect to the pandemic. So, for example, a Medicare for All bill that provided Medicare for all for everybody for the duration of the COVID crisis would not be subjected to Paygo. There's some question, however, about what would happen to that same bill when the COVID crisis is done. Okay, now to be honest, I think the Paygo exemption will probably last through the end of 2022 because we're likely to be grappling with the disease in some form or other until then. So if legislation were quickly to be passed to give people Medicare for all during the COVID period, I do think that this rules change would actually free up the House not to subject such a bill to Paygo. I think the same is true if they pass the job guarantee as a response to the climate crisis. So yes, this is a significant win on the part of the progressives. It looks great. Paygo requires, I should say, that any increase in spending by the federal government be matched by offsetting tax increases or budget cuts. So no deficit spending, okay, with respect to that, at least not over a 10-year period. And progressives, including AOC, have called for the rule to be revoked in recent years, while Pelosi and other Democrats have defended it. And here's AOC pointing out how important this critical rule change is in the House, that she's grateful for McGovern's leadership on this. Now, to be fair to McGovern, while he plays games from time to time, he has been a Medicare for All supporter over the years, for many, many years. I mean, I suspect he believes in it. Now, he's also been very, very close to Pelosi, and he follows her directives implicitly. But if she were not the speaker, things might be very different for McGovern, because he has backed Medicare for All in principle throughout his very long career in the House. So a tweet from Ryan Grimm. Progressives in the House have won a rules change that would allow Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, or other big-ticket agendas to be exempted from Paygo. This is a necessary step in opening the way for it. Ocasio-Cortez added the demotion of Paygo to the list of achievements by progressives in Congress in recent years. Doing this. Just a little flashback for you. This tweet is from my first day in Congress. While day one expectations aside, let's update with how things panned out. House Climate Select Committee created. Yeah, but as I recall, she didn't get a place on it, did she? Co-chaired Biden Climate Task Force that upgraded policy. Well, that Biden Climate Task Force has no official status and is not something that's getting into legislation. Paygo is getting demoted. That much is true. And it's worthwhile. And Bill Scher says Ocasio-Cortez demanded Pelosi create a New Deal committee and drop the Paygo Rule. She won on neither. Why the 116th Congress begins? Pelosi 2, AOC 0 in my latest before Politico. And Pelosi, of course, points out that some things have been learned. She says, one of the first deep lessons I learned in the House that process is policy. If you pass Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, etc., with messed up process rules, then it can be weaponized into austerity legislation by rules requiring it to have insane tax hikes or service cuts tied to it that aren't applied to others. She's absolutely right about that. So these rule changes are a big deal, and not only on healthcare, they are structural changes in the House that level the playing field for a full suite of flagship legislation locks in that field for the next 2 years and establishes precedents for after. That's true. She says this was not easy. I'm sure that was true too. Breaking the federal government and corporate political presses, austerity mindset and rules, especially on climate, is a major tenet of the Green New Deal. She's right about that too. And Brian Grimm said, the progressives in the House have won a rules change that would allow Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, or other big-ticket agenda items to be exempted from Paygo. This was a necessary step in opening the way for it. And there's the language of the rules change. It says to exempt the budgetary effects of measures to prevent, prepare for, or respond to economic or public health consequences resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, and to exempt the budgetary effects of measures to prevent, prepare for, or respond to economic, environmental, or public health consequences resulting from climate change. That's the language. It's clear. It's clear what it means. It's a valuable concession. And Ron Grimm says also it applies to things this term that can actually pass, like more checks and Medicaid and Medicare expansion, etc. And all this is true. But here's the question. Is this really enough? Is this really enough? So this is my question. You see a little celebration, by Ilhan Omar there too, and repetition of the same sorts of statements. Ilhan says, advocating for progressive values in Congress is hard if you can't get over the procedural hurdles that exist. Passing these reform rules is step one in our fight for progress. I'm optimistic about what we can accomplish in the 117th Congress if we stay focused and strategic. And Jayapal says, reforms to the motion to recommit and Paygo were the two top priorities for U.S. progressives in the rules package. These significant changes we negotiate with House leadership, get rid of procedural obstacles that are used to stop or weaken bold policies from passing a great start. And Dave says, Dave Dayan says, the motion to recommit language is, I believe, designed to prevent partisan motions from being offered. This tool has become a way for the minority party to force difficult or embarrassing votes on the majority party. And Nando Vila says, it's wild that Democrats support Paygo at all, but this seems like an important step. It is. And Alex quote, pay bars and restaurants to close, unquote. Lawson said, Paygo is literally the dumbest idea in D.C. It corrupts the whole system. It is the root of dumbness. Paygo is still in the proposed rule, but the exemptions are a great first step into the future where we can do good things as long as they are exempted from Paygo. And Marie Newman is celebrating this also. And she says amending Paygo opens the door to crucial legislation that meets the scale of our greatest challenges. She tweeted that. So that's the progressive side of the story. That's what they were negotiating for. That's what they got. That's why they don't seem to be amenable to replacing Nancy Pelosi. Well, but is that enough? It doesn't seem enough to me. Why isn't it enough to me? Number one, they traded that, evidently, they traded that for the support of the progressives. I have to assume, including the squad, with the 8 new squad members, the 8 squad votes, they traded those. And generally speaking, votes in the progressive caucus to Nancy Pelosi for those 2 rule changes. But they still have Nancy Pelosi in place to use her manipulations to block the bringing of key votes such as Medicare for All and the Green New Deal bills to the floor. And in addition, things like free college, things like the elimination of student debt, things like paid family leave, do not necessarily come under the heading of the 2 categories that were exempted from the Paygo rules. They would still be subject to Paygo. Housing legislation might perhaps be subject to Paygo unless it was tied to Green New Deal initiatives. Vast kinds of legislation having to do with lessening the inequality problem in our society might still be subjected to Paygo rules. Why weren't they able to negotiate in return for their support just the end to Paygo, period, end of story, end, no more? Now, some people are going to respond and say, look, this is Nancy Pelosi's last term. They can come back at the end of 2022 and maybe get the rest of Paygo taken away. Maybe, if they have enough leverage at the end of 2022. They have the leverage now, though. They can block Nancy Pelosi from being the Speaker of the House. They can give her a take it or leave it. I wouldn't even give her a take it or leave it, though. And we'll get to that, okay, in just a minute. But first question, why didn't they negotiate for a total end to Paygo? Why did they not also negotiate for floor votes on a whole set of items that are very, very important? Why didn't they negotiate for other rule changes? Like, for example, how about a rule change that triggers a floor vote automatically once you have a certain number of co-sponsors? Like, let's say 20 co-sponsors. If a bill gets 20 co-sponsors, it automatically gets a floor vote. How about a rule like that? That would really democratize the House. It would make the committees much less important. It would make the committee chairs much less important. It would do much to end the oligarchy we see in the House now. When you vote for a representative for Congress, you vote for someone who's supposed to represent you and who's supposed to have influence. So your freshman congressman goes into Congress with all your hopes and all your support. And he or she, as a backbencher, has almost no influence at all. Almost no influence at all. Completely subject to the committee chairs. Completely subject to the leadership team. Completely subject to the speaker. It's an oligarchy. You live in an oligarchy that governs your elections, shapes them, gives you choices that are very limited in certain ways because certain issues cannot be discussed. And then you elect someone to Congress that you like. And when that person gets in, there are even more limitations on that person because the oligarchy is in the House. The House is no longer the people's house. It's the oligarch's house. The oligarchs have their representatives in the House. Nancy Pelosi's team. Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, Steny Hoyer, Hakeem Jeffries. They with Pelosi are the top four. Then there's the assistant speaker, Catherine Clark. They are the oligarchy right now. Or at least the part of the oligarchy, the leadership aspect of the oligarchy. Then there are the little oligarchs in the various important committees. Richie Neal in Ways and Means, who can block Medicare for all from getting to the floor, and who's taken more money from the healthcare industry than anybody else in Congress. Then you've got the oligarchs in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and Jim McGovern, the oligarch of the Rules Committee. There are all these little oligarchs around. There are probably about 30 people who control the whole Congress. That's not a democracy in the House. We need further democratization of the House. Why didn't the progressives negotiate for that? Why were their horizons so limited? Did we elect them for that? AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Presley, they all raised large quantities of money for their re-election. They got substantial challenges from well-funded opponents. Can't remember whether Presley got one of those or not, but the other three did. They needed money to defeat those people. Where'd they get that money? They got that money from us, from people all over the country who placed their hopes in these young Congress people based on their rhetoric, based on what they said they stood for. And what do? Do they fight for democratization in the House? Do they get agreements on floor votes for Medicare for all? On floor votes for the Green New Deal? What good are these rule changes if they can't get the floor votes anyway? What would allow them to get those floor votes if Richie Neal doesn't want the floor votes? What would allow them to get those floor votes if Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to allow them to get those floor votes? What will allow them to get the floor votes if, let's say, Frank Pallone doesn't want them to get the floor votes? What did the progressives get when it comes to committee positions in the House? Just about a week and a half ago, word broke that AOC was beat out for a spot on the Energy and Commerce Committee that she dearly wanted, that would have given her an important voice in their proceedings in helping to pave the way for the Green New Deal. She was the favorite to win. She had the backing of the dean of the delegation from New York City, specifically Jerry Nadler. What did Pelosi do? She and Hakeem Jeffries approached Kathleen Rice, who had voted against Pelosi in 2018 for Speaker, while AOC voted for her in 2018. Kathleen Rice voted against her. And Pelosi approached Kathleen Rice with Hakeem Jeffries, who had a seat on that committee. And they persuaded her to run against AOC. And then Hakeem Jeffries supported her. And Henry Cuellar, a big enemy of AOC, because AOC had supported Jessica Cisneros in the primary campaign in Texas, a primary campaign to unseat Henry Cuellar, who was one of the two most conservative Democrats in the House, a terrible guy who mostly voted with Trump like 75% of the time. Jessica Cisneros gave him a run for his money, but of course he hates AOC because she endorsed and supported Cisneros. He didn't want her anywhere near the Energy and Commerce Committee, so he lobbied against her. And Jeffries lobbied against her, and others lobbied against her. And it was made known that Nancy Pelosi was supporting Kathleen Rice, that she had put Kathleen Rice in the race. So Kathleen Rice got a committee vote of 46-13. And AOC was denied. She was denied a committee spot she wanted the second time. The first time she was denied it in 2019 because they said she was just a freshman. Freshmen can't get on the committee. This time they manipulated the vote to freeze her out of the committee where she could really have some influence. So where's the committee spot for AOC? Where are the important committee spots for Rashida? Where are the important committee spots for Ilhan? Where are the spots that would give them the influence they need to really bring forward the legislation that we need? What did they get in that respect? I don't think they got anything. We haven't heard any news they got anything. They're not claiming they got anything. If they got anything, it's all secret. We don't know what it is. But why would we believe that Nancy Pelosi would give them anything? It's much more likely they just agreed to the rules changes and went home because they didn't want to fight. So, committee positions were not open to them. They got only one rules change, very important one, albeit, as far as we know, they didn't get any more floor votes. So, what could they have gotten? I wonder. Let's look at a couple other things. Give me a moment here. Okay, so here's the issue. There was another way for the squad in particular to negotiate. That way was to go in on the first ballot and block Nancy Pelosi with all 8 members of the House and keep on blocking her, simply denying her a majority of the caucus. Things are finally balanced in the House, this year. That's why the squad has leverage they didn't have before. If Nancy Pelosi hadn't lost 10 seats during the campaign because she ran the usual stupid campaign, she might have had 234 seats, 235 seats, 240 seats. And the progressives won't have as much influence as they have now. But because she screwed up, now the squad, not to mention other progressives, just the squad, the 8 members of them, hold the balance of power. Kevin McCarthy on the Republican side can probably get 212 to 213 votes. Without the squad, the most Nancy Pelosi can get is 214 votes. And that would not be a majority of votes cast. If Kevin McCarthy got 213 votes, Pelosi got 214 votes, then that's 227 votes. If the 8 members of the squad voted for persons other than those 2, any other persons, according to the rules, they don't even have to be in the House, then the non-Pelosi votes would total 221. And Pelosi's votes would only be 214. And she would not have made it to Speaker. Neither would Kevin McCarthy have made it to Speaker as well. So, why didn't the squad actually do that? Why didn't they go to the mat? Why didn't they fight? Why won't they fight even now? For this whole week, myself and the people I've been working with have been trying to get them to fight. We were using the hashtag today, hashtag replace Pelosi January 3rd. And the hashtag force the vote. And the phrase, hashtag replace Pelosi January 3rd and You then negotiate with other speaker candidates to then force the vote and get more changes. And of course, we explained what those changes ought to be. We were about forcing the vote too, but we were about replacing Pelosi first and then trading squad support and other progressive support to new speaker candidates who would step forward. But of course, they would have to accept the conditions that the squad insisted upon if they were going to get a majority. That's what we were tweeting for the last few days about. We got to trending a few times. We never got it to go viral, but we got it trending a few times. So there we were. Still been trending a few times. The vote occurs tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll probably be trending for a good, tweeting for a good part of the night tonight to still do everything we can to try to get them to listen to reason on it. But what is reason? Why is it reason? I'm going to share for you first. If they had gotten a commitment, which they could certainly get from a new speaker candidate, for a floor vote, okay, for Medicare for all. What were the benefits of a floor vote? First, there is making members go on record sorry, folks, there's a phone ringing in the background here. I'll continue in a minute. Okay, so the first of the benefits, okay, is making members go on record, exposing them to a primary if they vote against, possibly augmenting progressive numbers in Congress down the road, possibly weakening the establishment in 2023, showing their constituents they're fighting for them, also media exposure, the squad empowerment within the caucus, hang on a second. We've got some noise in the background. I'm going to close the door. So there's advantage in getting a Medicare for all floor vote. There's no question about that. There are a lot of things you can get out of that. It's valuable. What Jimmy's been suggesting has certainly been a thing that would be valuable. The question is whether it's valuable enough. If I had to say, would it be more valuable to get a floor vote or more valuable to get rid of the Paygo rules? I would have to say it would be more valuable to get rid of the Paygo rules. Because a Medicare for all floor vote would not have the support of Joe Biden. It would not have the support, of Nancy Pelosi. It most probably would not pass the House. If by some miracle it passed the House, it most probably would not pass the Senate. Yes, it would expose people to primaries in 2022, but that's a benefit in 2022. It would augment the numbers of progressives in Congress down the road, but we need stuff now. It would possibly weaken the establishment in 2023, but it might weaken the Democrats enough to bring the Republicans back in, which I'll tell you the truth. If you're looking at the climate emergency, if we bring the Republicans back in 2023 and the Republicans back in 2024, I mean, the clock is 1 minute to doom for us if we have to waste further time trying to deal with a Republican administration in total denial about the climate emergency. We can't afford that anymore. We really can't afford 4 years of a do-nothing Biden administration. Going further, showing their constituents they're fighting for them. Yeah, that's an advantage, certainly. But that's an advantage down the road in re-election in 2022. And there's the media exposure and squad empowerment within the caucus. So yeah, those things are valuable. But getting rid of the Paygo rules and being able to deficit spend and to argue for bills that are good but involve deficit spending, that's tremendously valuable. Tremendously valuable. I think it's more valuable because it opens up possibilities based on MMT knowledge that were not there before. I know Jimmy Dore doesn't care about that. He thinks it's, bologna sausage. But, well, that's him. Anyway, slide 6. Sorry, this was slide 6 of the presentation. So, there are these other benefits of replacing Pelosi for the squad, and the progressives. You'd have a new speaker who would be more open to squad policy positions because she or he would owe their positions to the squad votes. The new speaker would also be more open to congressional progressive caucus positions, which is somewhat more to the right than the squad positions are. But then also a new candidate for speaker could be negotiated with, that is before they get those votes for speaker, for far more than Pelosi appears to have given, and I say here would give, such as floor votes for multiple priorities, including Medicare for All. So you get the Medicare for All anyway, and you get the Green New Deal, and you get other things as well. You get student debt elimination. You get free college. You get paid family leave. You get all those things. You get rule changes like the elimination of Paygo. And you might have been able to get that trigger rule I spoke about to more easily get things to the floor without having to go through the damn committees all the time. I mean, the committees are places where good bills often go to die. Now, I know bills are improved by going through the committees also. Not saying the committees can't be useful, but I am saying they couldn't be used as places where the bills go to die if bills had a certain number of co-sponsors that triggered automatic floor votes. That would be a counterbalance to the powers of the committees. And by the way, would neutralize a lot of the role of money in the Congress also. They could have negotiated good committee positions for the squad with a new speaker candidate, because a new candidate is weak, not strong. They have to make the deals they need to make to get in. So they could get the good committee positions or promises of that from a candidate who needs their votes in order to get into the speaker's position. Now, even though Pelosi needed their votes too, she wouldn't bargain in the same way as a new candidate. Why not? Because she's been powerful. She's been arrogant. She's been set in her ways for so long. She thinks people have no right to question her. I mean, look at how she acts with the press. That little performance, with Wolf, with Blitzer, from CNN, who questioned her. And she got on her high horse. How dare you? She just about said, how dare you ask me a question? I mean, it was ridiculous. The whole thing was ridiculous. Perfectly reasonable questions. I mean, a demonstration of total arrogance and entitlement. They could have negotiated for decent offices and perks. And they could also have had all the benefits mentioned for Medicare for All alone. So this is what we've been trying to persuade the squad to do. Okay, so what's the current situation? What's the current situation now? How does it look? Well, something somewhat unexpected has happened, and recently happened. There are some CIA House members in Congress. As far as I can remember at this point, there are 3 on the Democratic side. They are Elissa Slotkin. She's a Michigan representative. Abigail Spanberger, but from the Virginia 7th. And Elaine Luria, who I forget the number of her district here, but she's another ex-CIA. Except I don't think you can be ex-CIA in the same way as you can be other exes. Okay. In other words, you can be an ex-McKinsey, and you're ex-McKinsey. That's it. If you're ex-CIA, though, I think you never quite can get out of the CIA. There's certain things you cannot talk about. Okay. Anyway, Slotkin has said she's decided to make a present vote, which is like an abstention for Speaker. It doesn't count towards a majority for either the non-Pelosi votes or the Pelosi votes. So instead of 435 votes, there are 444 votes to contend with now. Jared Golden of Maine, who's a pretty centrist guy, and Abigail Spanberger, the other CIA agent, who's also rather centrist, have said they'll go through with their commitments not to vote for Nancy Pelosi. So they're voting against her. So that's 2 votes. Now, it's pretty clear that there'll be 212 or 213 votes for Kevin McCarthy. So the non-Pelosi votes start off then at 215 out of the 434 votes. If 2 of the 8 squad members should vote for some person other than McCarthy and Pelosi, then the maximum number of votes it would be possible for Pelosi to get would be 217 to Kevin McCarthy's, to the non-Pelosi votes, 217. So there would be no majority there. It would be tied at 217. So Pelosi would be blocked for the speakership with only 2 squad votes. Now, Cori Bush, also Jamal Bowman, in interviews on television this week, refused to say who they were going to commit to, who they were going to vote for. They said they haven't really decided yet. And they don't owe anything to Pelosi. They were elected to work as progressives, strong progressives like the original squad members. They may very well have the same attitude the squad members had when they were getting into Congress, which was not to vote for Mama Bear. If they go ahead with that, if they stick to that, then Pelosi would be blocked on the first ballot right then and there. Wouldn't even require any more squad members. How is Rashida Tlaib going to feel about this when 2 freshman squad members have the guts to oppose Nancy Pelosi? Can Rashida the firebrand really be far behind? How about Ilhan? Is she going to hang back there and say, gee, I'm going to stick with Mama Bear? I don't know. Looks to me like there's a pretty good chance to block Pelosi from getting a majority on the first ballot. And maybe if she fails on the first ballot, of course, there's going to be tremendous pressure on everyone to fall in behind her. But maybe if they don't, on the first ballot, it might be the squad would finally decide to coalesce and see that they can get far more than what they've gotten so far if they get rid of Nancy Pelosi, and they could also get a speaker in power who would not be so damned unfriendly to them every day of the week, every day of the year, every day they're in Congress trying to undermine them in some way. Wouldn't it be nice to have a friendly speaker? Wouldn't it be nice to have a friendly speaker? So at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, this vital vote is going to happen. And I got to say, this protest that Jimmy Dore has organized for here in D.C. for the 3rd and the 4th, once Nancy Pelosi is elected, she's not going to produce a Medicare for All floor vote on the 3rd and the 4th. And she's not going to agree to one because once she's elected speaker, which she will be if the squad does not vote against her solidly tomorrow morning, if that doesn't happen tomorrow morning, then it's all over. Those protests might as well just disband and go home, because it's all over but the shouting. After that, the key event is tomorrow morning at 9 p.m. That's when things have to happen. That's when things have to happen. So, I am now open for questions. If you have any, I will entertain them. And of course, I'll take a look at your comments in just a moment anyway. Okay. Some normal questions here that come up, that always come up is, who would replace Pelosi? Who would replace Pelosi? Well, nobody's stepping forward now because nobody wants to buck the mama bear. That is certainly true going on now. Okay. So, I'm going to get to your comments now. I see there are still 29 of you here, so let me get here. Okay, Kay says, as far as the rule changes go, it could be helpful. Sure. Dale Weaver says, good evening all. Materato says, you're going to go into the history of Paygo? No, I'm not going to much go into the history of Paygo because that's a very long story, and I wanted to concentrate on its present significance. I can go very deeply into Paygo, but I'll do that some other time, if you like, if there's sentiment for it. Bonnie says, hi, everyone. And Dolores Pierce says, hi, all. And Deborah Wilson says, Happy New Year, fam. And Anthony smiles. Kay says, shared. Bonnie says, Happy New Year, everyone. Steve Wolfbrand said, LA County has become a COVID hell. I know it's a COVID hell. My daughter lives there. And Deborah Wilson says, also share to the public. Katrina Marie says, Happy New Year. Jeffrey Denton says, hey, Joe. And Materato says, we could have closed the country down immediately, provided complete economic and medical security to all citizens, and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. We had all the resources to do it. Yep, we did. And Matt says, what are Biden's big plans for handling the pandemic? I don't know. He seems to be taking a very political approach to it as well, but one that seems a little more firm about actually doing something about the pandemic. And whatever man says, hey, y'all, Donald Switlick reacted to my video, are the rules changes enough, on Facebook. And a new subscriber subscribed to my channel. Deborah Wilson says, Matt sending little kids back to school ASAP. And Independent Left.News. Yeah, he did say that. He wants to send the kids back to school fairly quickly. Independent Left.News says, Joe, you're taking all my content. You must be reading my newsletter. Well, you know, I've been saying this all week, Independent Left, and you've been all there while I've been saying it. So, of course, we're talking about the same content. Jeff Denton says he's had 2 brain aneurysms that the Republicans strangely did not breathe one word and worry we're concerned about, and he couldn't put a complete sentence together on his own if he was actually paid to. So I seriously doubt he has the capability to plan anything on his own, just like the belligerent orange con man. Okay, I know this may sound funny. There's a lot of sentiment like the one you just expressed out there. But, I mean, I'm seeing Joe Biden talk now very frequently. He does seem like an old man. He talks more slowly than he used to talk. He is an old man. I'm certainly an old man. I know what old men talk like, and stuff like that. He really doesn't look like he's completely lost it, but to me. I mean, he's pretty much acting the way he used to act, as far as I can tell. He used to talk a little faster. He used to be a little sharper. That certainly was true. He used to be a little more quick-witted, okay, with the remarks. But I don't see any evidence he can't sit down with people and in a group come up with a plan, which is a decent plan and maybe better than Trump's. I'm sure that his level of attention, that his attention span is far greater than Donald Trump's. I'm real sure of that. And Kay says, Sherrod Brown lied again. No surprise, did he? Yeah, he's gotten into lying these days. He never used to lie. He lies now. And Independent Left News says, Common Dreams, Daily Poster, In These Times, Truth Out, and more. Yeah, of course, I read all those things. Okay, and Anthony gives me a clover leaf. Looks like a clover leaf icon. Thank you, Anthony. And Matterado says, is this trivial anyways? Are the $2,000 just won by means tested? No, the $2,000 a person in the House bill, it was $2,000 per person, including children. So one couple with two children was going to get $8,000 out of that. It was a big deal. Hell, it's a big deal for me and Bonnie. We'd get $4,000 out of it. I mean, that's a big deal for us. Kay says, I got the 600 now. Okay, I got to go get it out of there to keep my Medicaid. Shake my head.
Did they send a check or did they just deposit it?
For some people, they're going to deposit it, and for others, they're going to send a check. So I can't remember. Did they send us a check last time or deposit it?
I can't remember.
I can look back and I can see.
You're older than me. You should know.
Yeah, I'll just look back at the bank statements. That's all. And Matt says, it is literally battling over crumbs, okay? It is unbelievable. Well, from the budgetary standpoint, it's hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not crumbs. I think it would come to $650 or $750 billion. So, it's a big budget item. Of course, if you're a person who still believes in austerity nonsense and the limitations of the government to fund things, it seems like a gigantic amount. For people who know some MMT, though, I mean, it's nothing. The government can spend what it wants to for the public purpose, as long as it doesn't get into inflation problems. And based on all the economic analyses I've seen, there's no possibility of any inflation problems in the short term. And there are plenty of measures to take against inflation if we see any long-term inflation. So it's no problem. You spend it and you get the economy out of trouble, or keep it out of trouble anyway. Keep people in their homes. Keep people away from the virus. And you keep people from putting savings away for when the economy comes back. In other words, you let them get enough so they can put some savings away so they have something to spend when the economy comes back. I mean, look at what was done in World War II. People had all these savings accumulated. They couldn't spend them in World War II. Right now, a lot of places they can't spend. Some people won't be able to spend the stimulus checks they get into the economy. That's not so bad, because when the economy comes back, they will be able to spend, and we will get a roaring economy coming back fast, and we want that. Jeff Denton says, it just really gets my goat. The longest serving independent is one of the few people in Washington, D.C. actually acting like a traditional Democrat. That's because he is a traditional Democrat. There's no place in the Democratic Party anymore for a New Deal Democrat. That's why Bernie had to be an independent. In the 1990s, there was certainly no place for an FDR Democrat. I mean, the only FDR Democrat that was left then, other than Bernie, was maybe Ted Kennedy. That was it. I mean, once you got past those two, what the hell was going on? And once Teddy died off, so that's it, Jeff Denton. The government has the nerve to send out people to try and claim he's some sort of sellout, FFs? That doesn't prove people's heads are purposely being messed with. I don't know what in the world ever would. Kay says, Medicaid is still screwing me around here in Ohio too. Shake my head. We need single payer badly. We do. We need single payer badly. We need a single payer vote also badly. But since we could get a single payer vote and votes for all the other things we need badly too, we ought to be negotiating for that and for the rule changes and for the committee positions. I mean, negotiate. Tough. And Independent Left says, Kamala happily cut Bernie's legs on the stimulus. Didn't take any prodding from anyone else. Yeah, Bernie really shows her up. He shows that she's just another Hillary. She's another Hillary. I could tell from the first time I heard her laugh. Barney says, the DNC does not care about people. Is that democratic? No, it is not democratic. It is not the Democratic Party. They ought to change their names. They're the plutocrats party now. Matt says, it's terrible, Kay, how we make people live. Independent Left News says, Bernie's not a Democrat. Proud that he's not. So technically only 5 Dems plus Bernie voted against the NDAA. Yeah. Kay says, it is ridiculous here in Ohio for sure. And Independent Left News says it's Kamala Harris by record. I'm going to refer to Independent Left.news as Indie Left. It's shorter. And Matt says we desperately need a third party. Yeah, some people are building one. It's called the People's Party. And there's a movement for the People's Party. And they're already in Maine. And Bonnie's raising her hand. Yes.
I voted for it.
And Bonnie voted in.
I joined.
Yeah, she joined and she voted for the name of the People's Party, which is the name of the People's Party in Maine, the first state in which it's been established. It's trying to get incorporated in Colorado now. And 1102 says, yay, Jeff is better. Yeah, Jeff Merkley is terrific. Independent Left says, Jeff Merkley, or Ed Markey are progressive too. They are. And 102 says, so Markey backed Iraq, but he's at least willing to help, but to help on the progressive initiatives. He is, but I don't think he would back Iraq anymore. No, I don't think he would back Iraq anymore. Who was the only person who did not back Iraq? It was Barbara Lee. I think at the time even Bernie backed Iraq, didn't he? So Markey wasn't the only one who backed Iraq. Steve Wolfbrand said, Warren folded up her TP again. Well, no, not in this case. She didn't fold up her TP. She was one of the 6 Democrats, okay, who voted against it. No, she didn't fold up her TP on this occasion. She was with the 6. She was one of the 6. Matt says, when you put this recent theatrical performance in the context of the CARES Act $1 trillion giveaway, it is horrible. Even when you don't put it in the context of the CARES Act, it's horrible. But when you take the CARES Act alone, that was horrible too. A $4.6 trillion money cannon for the rich? Are you kidding me? For the corporations, I should say. That was awful. Jim Bird says, hello all. Hi, Jim. Deborah says, useless Dem leadership. Independent Left says, they screwed us all. Bernie keeps on trying. Says, who said Bernie keeps on trying? Scroll down too fast. Sorry, folks. Kim says, hey, Joe. And a lot of comments. I'm seeing a lot of funny comments here. I scrolled down too fast and went by a whole bunch of comments. And now I'm trying to find where I stopped. Oh, there's Rick Maynard. Hey, care to give me a call when you can? Sure, Rick, I will. And yes, I will, Rick. If you're still here, I'll give you a call when I can. And Kevin St. Ford says, hey, Joe. And I'm reading backwards now because I'm still scrolling back to get to where I screwed up. Matt says, I think Joe's getting too angry. The tone police are coming. The left, the tone police are coming, yeah. Tone police are coming after me. Steve Wolfman asks if anyone else is thoroughly depressed. Okay. And Matt Arado, by the way, some of my comments simply disappeared at about 9:36 p.m. Matt says, this gets so complicated because there is a Paygo law and then there are Paygo rules in the House and there are all sorts of different conditions and waivers attached to them. Yes, that is true. But the Paygo law, which was passed in 2010, isn't really operative if the majority caucus doesn't want to make it so. It's easy to get out of that, and the Republicans did get out of it constantly. And so the Democrats can easily get out of it too. Kay says, I watched the protest on D.C. today by the People's Party. Yeah, People's Party, Jimmy Dore and Bree Joy Gray. Matt says, AOC and her mouthpieces at The Intercept are trying to sell this as an incredible victory for progressives. I know. Oh, my God. Steve Gonzo says Steve Grumbine has COVID. Oh, that's awful. Oh, that's awful. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm so sorry. That's really terrible.
Yeah.
But we hope his family is all right. Matt said, Steve, he's had a cough for a while. Did he just tweet it? Evelina said, so hard to hear that. He's a great guy. Hope he'll be okay. Kay says, hi, Evelina. Yeah, we hope he'll be okay, too. He's important for the movement. He's important, okay, for the MMT movement. Okay. I really hope that he recovers very, very fast. Steve says, convo catchers in D.C. protesting. Yeah, I was watching Johnny Tsunami and Pastor and Fee standing in front of the monument. Iconic picture of people standing with the monument in the background. And they were looking good there. Steve Gonzo said he posted it on his story today. Oh, that's awful. And Kay says, Steve Gonzo, did I see 14,000 in Ohio today? And Matt says, last year, Paygo rules in the House were supported by the Progressive Caucus. I think only Kana, Gabbard, and AOC were the only ones to vote against it. I know, because Pelosi wanted it. And Pelosi wanted it. She reestablished it. Deborah said, how in good conscience could Joe not do this, healthcare for all, at this time? Oh, that's right. He's owned by the insurance industry. Sorry, Charlie. And Matt Arano says, this is silly. So this is what the Prague caucus got for voting for an 80-year-old speaker who just lost seats in the House and has a worse approval rating than Trump. Yeah, her approval rating is 20% or something like that. 80% of the people disapprove. Okay, Matt says, Diaz rule changes apply just to the House and only for COVID and climate change bills, not for Medicare for all. Well, they think they can import legislation with the Medicare for all as part of the COVID relief. So they think they can put it in that way. And Matt says, silly Paygo is not going to pass up legislation. They cannot get progressive legislation through now, and it is not because of Paygo. Yeah, if they really wanted to get the legislation through, they could always pass an exemption from Paygo in that context. They could certainly do that. And Daniel C., there's some icons there that I can't read in this interface. Materato says, this is marketing. Oh, I should also say to people, please keep in mind, I'm simultaneously streaming to Facebook and YouTube. Some of the comments I'm reading are YouTube comments, some are Facebook comments. So if you're not seeing some of the comments, don't get upset because they're coming through on YouTube. My comment stream here is a consolidated comment stream from both places. That's why I can read them. Nat says, this is marketing. The hype is far in excess of the reality. They got nothing for their support, of Nancy Pelosi. If they have supported, I notice the wording of the announcement is that Nancy Pelosi made an agreement with the progressives. What does that mean? I think it means she made an agreement with the CPC. That's what it means. Now, the CPC is not the kind of organization where all its members are bound together to vote for the same thing, including the Speaker of the House. The 8 squad members could perfectly well not at all violate terms of their membership in the CPC and vote against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. That's not going to be a problem. Okay? It all depends on whether the squad was part of the agreement or not. The impression they're giving is that they were part, of the negotiated agreement. But I suspect that if this operated in the same way it did when they were elected in 2019, that it was probably Jayapal who went ahead and made the agreement. Okay, and the squad is happy about it, but I don't think the squad is committed to it in the same way Jayapal and the CPC is. Now, that's just my theory. It's my speculation. I don't know if it's true. IndependentLeft.news says it's going to get torpedoed and committed, or they'll attach a poison pill for it. I agree. Okay, and Independent Left says, well, COVID rent or COVID rent, mortgage relief could be used to subvert the Paygo, but they won't. Nat says, this is just slow burn incrementalism that the left is so famous for, with nuclear war, climate change, massive inequality in this pandemic plaguing us. You don't have a time for this. Too many people are dying and suffering. I completely agree. I mean, with no Medicare for all, look, you had, going out of the Obama administration, you had 33 million people who were uncovered. The official statistics said 30 million people, but we know that was not true, that there were more, roughly around 33 million people uncovered at that time. We know Trump chipped away at that with various measures over 4 years. We can pretty well estimate, before COVID hit the scene, there were 37 million people uncovered. Now, there are at least 13 to 15 million more people who lost their insurance as a result of the economic dislocations during COVID. Maybe more than that. Let's say it's 15 million. We're talking 52 million people without insurance right now. Now, there's a ratio from literature I've picked up that various survey studies done over the years, if you take a consensus figure from what they show that 1 out of every 781 people who don't have insurance are fatalities due to lack of coverage. So divide that 57 million or so, I'm sorry, did I say 57 million? 52 million. Divide that 52 million by 781 and tell me how many thousands of fatalities per year there are now, not counting the additional fatalities because people are unable to get treatment for COVID because they don't have the insurance. In other words, that's just for people who didn't have COVID and needed to have some kind of medical care and had no insurance. That's not for the people among them who had COVID. I mean, their death rates without any medical care are going to be much higher than 1 out of every 781. I don't even know how to make that adjustment at this point. But to begin with, just divide by 781 and then tell me what that figure is. I don't have it at my fingertips. Off the top of my head, I'd say it's about 60,000 people a year now who are dying due to lack of insurance. That's just lack of insurance. There are hundreds of thousands of people dying from inadequate care. And of course, we know the fatalities from COVID alone are already 365,000, something like that. I read off the figure here tonight. Was it 369,000? I forget. Kay says it's going to change by another 2,000 by tomorrow anyway. Kay says, that's what I thought I saw. Shake my head. And Matt says, the Progressive Caucus is useless. The squad is useless. They're just not up to the demands of this moment. It is going to take general strikes, boycotts, and protests to move things. Or if things get worse, perhaps we'll get a real fascist emerge in 2024 that, similar to Mussolini, will promise to end the suffering of the masses. And similar to Mussolini, will not do so. And 010101011102 says, what about my risk of a worse corporate Democrat replacing Nancy Pelosi? The risk of that is practically nil because the risk of getting Kevin McCarthy is practically nil. So that's out of the question. And of course, if any corporate Democrat were to step forward, and there will be, Hakeem Jeffries will step forward. He will be one of those. Some problem solver caucus types will step forward. Who knows, maybe Abigail Spanberger is even going to step forward, okay, and want to be the Speaker of the House. They'll step forward all right. But the point is, if Nancy Pelosi needed the 8 squad votes to get into the speakership, then whoever comes forward after she's withdrawn and she is out of the picture is going to need the same 8 squad votes. And they're not going to go for anyone who's to the right, okay, of Nancy Pelosi. That's not going to happen. Someone is going to emerge like, for example, Debbie Dingell or Jan Schakowsky, okay, or, say a Rosa DeLauro or somebody like that. Somebody who will be progressive on some things and who will be willing to negotiate with the squad for the things the squad actually wants and needs, like the floor votes, okay, and the elimination, okay, of Paygo and the good committee spots. Those things are all doable with that kind of candidate. Now, do not mistake me. I'm not saying that a real progressive can get in. I think the furthest left you can probably go might be a Barbara Lee, but it won't be more lefty than Barbara Lee, certainly. And I don't think Barbara I don't think that Barbara Lee is very lefty when it comes to fiscal policy. I don't think that's a strong point, a strong suit. She's very lefty when it comes to foreign policy, yes, but not when it comes to fiscal policy. Not when it comes to the kind of economic policy we need, okay, at this point. She'd probably be good on green stuff, though, too. Deborah Wilson says, they're not, nor do they as a body want to be representative. That's the way it's designed. But they can be more representative in spite of the design. They've shown that at various times in our history. So Joseph Stolin, Stolin, says, don't worry, Trump will win, Joseph. And Materato says, I think Joe is getting too angry. The tone police are coming. The left likes its people to suffer in silence. And Carmen says, hi, sorry, so late, just awoke from a migraine. Hi, Carmen. Sorry to hear you got a migraine. Matt says, Carmen Muniz, this is not going to help you feel better. Carmen says, nothing does. Whatever Man says, good rant on the oligarchy. That is clip-worthy. Thank you, Whatever Man. An Independent Left says they block anyone perceivably worse than Pelosi as well. Yeah, they will block anyone who's perceivably worse. And Matt says, okay, the Progressive got 0. Well, I don't agree with that they got 0. But maybe they got 5 when they should have gotten 95. How's that, Matt? Steve says Joe is pissed. And Carmen says, I hear Huggable Hulk is in the house. And Independent Left says Cuellar is a Trump Democrat. Yeah. But Dan Lipinski was a Trump Democrat too. But the squad beat him. The squad beat him. That was another reason why they were real mad at AOC. And Matt said, Steve Wolfbrand, he should be. I think we all are. It is absurd to watch the Prague caucus pat themselves on the back as they got nothing of substance for the people. Steve said, I know, Matt. And Joy Bayoli said, who's Speaker of the House now? Well, I may not look at it, but it's Nancy Pelosi. She's still the Speaker of the House, at least until tomorrow. Tomorrow, Congress convenes, and the first thing it will do is to elect a new Speaker of the House. Now, the new Speaker of the House may look very much like the old Speaker of the House. It may be the old Speaker of the House. We don't know. The smart money is saying it is going to be the old Speaker of the House, that she does have commitments from people in order to get elected. But I don't know. And Carmen Yunus says, hogheads for Nasty Nancy. And Materato says, last year the House passed a rule to let Omar wear a hijab on the floor. So maybe they get some nice perks like that. Matt says, the Tea Party Freedom Caucus did a lot more with a lot less. I think most of us wanted to see the squad raise hell. AOC sounds like a veteran poll now. That's amazing how quickly they turn. Matt says, the squad, well, I'll tell you, if she's really turned and continues to look like she's turned, then in order to get money for the reelection, she's going to have to start taking some corp money because she's not going to get it from small donors anymore. I'll tell you that. Matt says the squad could have a unified agenda that they pushed in the media 24/7. They could be super aggressive in the House. They could organize strikes, sit-ins, etc. But they don't really want to fight like this. I think they like the salary, the health care, the fame, the perks. I don't know, Matt. I don't know. I don't know what the inside is like for them. Steve says, what's the use of a squad that won't fight? I completely agree with that. Hey, Kevin St. Fort, great to see you here. Matt says, I mean, AOC was a bartender. She now has millions of followers on the cover of mags, etc. She can play this gig out and make out, and she will have a ton of simps supporting her. Yeah, maybe. But she won't have me supporting her anymore. She won't have you supporting her, Matt. There won't be any contributions from us anymore. Not that those amounted, I'm sure, to a whole hell of a lot. But the hundreds of thousands of people like us did amount to a whole hell of a lot. And we may be going to the People's Party before very long. We're certainly contemplating that, which, of course, is what Jimmy and the People's Party was about in this whole movement. That's what they were trying to do. They were trying to show that these people who were supposedly progressive inside of the Democratic Party would not really stand with us when they had the power to stand with us. And they've done a very good job of showing that that seems to be true, because after this hour, they're still not standing with us. They're still convinced they did a wonderful thing because they got rid of Paygo. Evelina says, that may be, Matthew, but the corporate Dems don't want to change. They're really used to privilege. Matt said, yes, I don't think we're going to get substantial change without a third party. There has to be something that breaks the duopoly. Evelina says, not just AOC. It's the squad we should pressure, all of them, not all AOC. I agree with that, Evelina. I also think this. There is an inside-outside strategy that was being followed here by the progressives. The inside part of it was you go inside the Democratic Party and you try to reform it, okay, and you try to change it. The outside part was, and we'll get that change, and we'll do that change through the outside pressure on the Democratic Party. Well, the outside pressure on the Democratic Party is here, but without the insiders making common cause with the outsiders, the inside-outside strategy doesn't work, because the insiders need to support the outsiders to have it work. The outsiders can't give unconditional support to the insiders because the outsiders are the movement. The insiders are not the movement. They work for the movement. If they start thinking they work for themselves or they know better, the inside-outside strategy won't work. The outsiders are just going to go somewhere else. Matt says, right. I think AOC is the target because she is so popular. And she came into the House with such refreshing rhetoric of fiery activism, but she rolled very quickly. Well, I'm not ready to conclude that she's rolled. I think she's been more cagey. I think she has been more cagey. Now, if she votes for Pelosi tomorrow, based on what little she'd get, I'd be willing to say she's rolled. So it's only for tonight I'm expressing some doubts because I still have, always being a hopeful person, I still have some minimal help that when she sleeps on it tonight, she'll wake up with a different idea in the morning. We'll see.
Who was the woman that Pelosi said was going to stand in for her?
Oh, Catherine Clark is her assistant speaker.
And what if people say, why doesn't she try to get it there?
Well, she might run. On the surface, she's far more lefty than Pelosi. She's a Medicare for All co-sponsor, and she's a Green New Deal co-sponsor. And she comes from a Massachusetts district that's fairly liberal also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
She might turn out to be acceptable to the squad.
Mm-hmm.
She might be willing to deal with them. I put her as one of the possibilities as a possible successor. Evelina says, wouldn't this have to be another country altogether for a third party to take hold? Only a crashing economy and worsening by pandemic and tsunamis, cabs, can change America. Well, we could very well have a crashing economy, and we could very well, I don't know if we're going to have a worsening pandemic, but it could be worsening for quite a few more months yet. It all depends on whether the vaccines are delivered in a timely manner and whether they're effective against the new strain of the coronavirus. We don't know yet if they're going to be effective against the new strain. Steve says, haven't given up on AOC, but it's not looking good. And I got to say the same, Steve. I haven't given up on her, but it is also not looking good. Also, I don't think that AOC is the same as Ilhan or the same, as the other two. I think, in particular, Rashida is a firebrand. And I'm not sure that if AOC sells out or is in the process of selling out, that the same can be said of Tlaib. They're not the same person. And Rick Maynard says, hey, care to give me a call when you can. Sure. Matt says, you may be right, Evelina, we may need more catastrophe and more death. What a bizarre stage of human evolution we are living in. Doc, have you guys tried to reach out to Jimmy, about your plan? Yeah, we tweeted, at Jimmy and tried to reach out, in various ways. But it seems what happens with Jimmy, if anybody wants to do anything else, other than just say, but force the vote, then Jimmy thinks they're traitors. Okay, we think our plan is more radical than Jimmy's. I mean, what does Jimmy's do? If it was completely successful, it would get people a floor vote, Medicare for all, and Pelosi would still be sitting pretty in the speakership. All the rules would still be intact. All the oligarchs would still be intact. Our plan for things was far more radical than Jimmy Dore's. Any day in the week. Carmen says, shoot, we have to worry about violence and the coup on Tuesday. Yeah, we do. We'll see. We'll take that as it comes. We might have to go into the streets on Tuesday. Evelyn says, we need the squad to work. AOC can't on her own. Let's be honest. I agree. There's got to be the 8 members of the squad. But Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman look like they're ready to go at it. Both of them. Anytime. If AOC will stand, they'll stand with her, and Rashida will stand with her, and Ilhan will stand with her. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mondaire Jones and Marie Newman don't also. And Matt says, I'd like to see single-issue bills. There should be only one issue so you can see where everyone stands and no one can hide. Well, it's hard to make that happen. And the reason why is because each bill, even if it's like single-payer Medicare for all, that touches a lot of other issues, touches on a lot of other issues. It's important for inequality. It's important also for the economy. It's important for foreign trade. It impacts a number of different issues. It helps us greatly in the foreign trade area in terms of competitiveness if we have a Medicare for all system here. Because that's been a cost, to business that cuts down on our exports, makes us less competitive in international trade. Kay says, Carmen Muniz, that's not going to be pretty for sure. But really is the election that never seems to end. Well, Kay, I don't know about the elections ever seeming to end, but I do know that we, the people, have to find a way to be active and be involved in politics 365 days a year. And the reason why we need to do that is because that's what the lobbyists do. And the interests. They're always there. They're always top of mind. They're always impinging on the decision makers every day of the year. And unless we do the same thing, we cannot have the mind share from the decision makers that way we need to have. They need to be as afraid or more afraid of us than they are of the interests. They've got to be thinking about us all the time. They can't be spending time raising money from all the fucking donors all the time. Kay says, Carmen Muniz, that is not going to be pretty for sure. Really is the election never seems to end. And Steve Gunter said, Ted Cruz's daughter just dragged him on Instagram. I don't know what that means, dragged him. Maybe means dragged him off the public stage and said, behave, you idiot. And Matt says, Evelina Pont, we need as many people as we can. Now, Ted Cruz is really the dangerous guy. He's the real dangerous one. He's a lot smarter than Trump. I think he's a lot meaner than Trump, too, underneath it all. Evelina Pont says, we need as many people as we can in an actual voting bloc, a group of people that have a detailed agenda and a strategy to implement it. It is clear there is no such bloc. That's right, Matt. And Kay says, the pig's head in Paygosi's driveway might have given her a second thought. I don't know. She'll just hire armed guards to be there all the time, I mean, think about it. She's worth, what, $130 million, $150 million, something like that. She can hire full-time guards for as long as she needs them. Steve Wolfbrand said, exactly, Matthew. The bill should be 2 or 3 pages, not 5,000. It's pathetic. And by the way, she can probably get a Secret Service detail to be there. Matt says, K. Clark Ryan, it's an interesting point. I think that Mitch's residence was also defaced. Carmen says, she'll just try to make ice cream out of it. Kay says, yes, it was Matthew. Yes, it was Matthew. And Matt says, Steve Wolfman right, and those bills are composed of armies of corporate lawyers behind closed doors. It's criminal. Matt says, at a certain point, the suffering is going to be so great that more violence will be the rule, not the exception. Steve Gonzo says cinder blocks might work. Carmen says, yeah, tied to their feet in deep water. Evelyn says, that would be squad on principle. Forget about one AOC pulling it together. They all have to work here. Steve says, oh, a Molotov would get her attention. The JS. I think he's talking about Nancy Pelosi's attention. Evelina says, a mafia laugh out loud. Independent Left.News says, but Nancy will make a deal with the CIA-3. She probably will make a deal with the CIA-3, but that's not going to help her if the Squad 8 stand together. That doesn't help her at all. The assumptions, Kay, that I originally made was that the CIA-3 were going to vote for her, that she was going to have 214 votes on the first ballot, not 211 votes. Their opposition to me is a surprise. I did assume, though, the Squad would have more backbone than this. Steve Wolfbrand says we're nearly there. Independent Left says, oh, this is like a game of musical chairs. And Mattis says, maybe we can see a Pelosi-Feinstein ticket in 2024. Yeah, we can call it the ticket of the ancients. I should talk. I'm younger than Feinstein, but I'm older than Pelosi. And Matt says, is C-SPAN covering the vote on Sunday? I suppose we can probably see it on YouTube. Independent Left.News says, ID take a non-adversarial speaker who supports Medicare for all. Yeah. Probably Debbie Dingell. Probably that is Debbie Dingell. Natarado says yes. Independent says Jimmy didn't organize the rally, KNDC. Yeah, there were a lot of people who organized it, right? But he was certainly one of them, wasn't he? Steve Wolfbrand said Feinstein he certainly did a lot of marketing for it. And Feinstein says, Steve says, Feinstein doesn't remember her own name. Sad. Yeah, she keeps saying Lindsey Graham, Lindsey Graham, Lindsey Graham. Anthony says, I've got to wake up and call them at 8 a.m. then. Yeah, I got to wake up tomorrow to be there for the vote. I don't know how I'm going to do that.
We're night people.
Yeah, we're night people. I mean, we've been going to bed 4 o'clock in the morning this week. And Lana Dell Hates the Clock says, what is the likelihood of the GOP taking back the House in 2022 if Nancy Pelosi remains Speaker versus a new one? I think the likelihood is very high. I think them voting for Nancy Pelosi now is giving away the House in 2022. Knowing what I know about her, it's giving away the House. It's giving away the presidency. The House goes. The House goes. I mean, it's a Republican back in 2024. Russ says, I hope they vote her out. Me too. Independent Left.News says almost 100%. Carmen Muniz says, by Dolores Pierce, what does the Star say about tomorrow morning's vote? Even it's Dr. Joe, you think maybe the Squad members' ambitions are waning? They're just happy to have gotten this far, which isn't far enough, but farther than they ever dreamed. By contrast, the Corp Dems, they are radical as it is. I don't know if I generalize about all the Squad. I think Rashida is in there for the duration as somebody doing radical things. Okay, I have had the feeling, based on things she said, that AOC may already be getting tired of it all, that it's, been becoming too much for her. Maybe. That this is just a personal thing with respect to personality, and stuff like that. For a while, I think it was fun for her. But, I think now she might be thinking that she'd like to do something else. I don't know. And Steve Gonzo says, Joe B keeps calling KH president-elect. Steve Wolfman, strangely, one doesn't actually have to be in Congress to be Speaker. I know. Maybe they should elect Harris as Speaker of the House. And she could be Speaker of the House and President of the Senate at once. Matt says, that is because she is. Biden will not last more than a year or two. And Steve Gonzo says, unless he has Cheney's doc. Kim says, hey, Joe. Hey, Kim. Matarado says, I saw him speak live 3 years ago. I think his decline is very noticeable. Yeah, it's certainly noticeable that he's older. Yemen needs serious help. Let your representatives know. They do. Kay says, Dems in Ohio are just GOP light. And Independent Left says, I have 3 kids. I'd get 10K. That's great, right? Wouldn't it be great, Indy Left, if you got 10K? Indy Left says, F Mitch McConnell. And Evelina says, subliminally, not up to the challenge. He's another just content with finally having made it to the presidency 3rd time around. He might not even care all that much if he completes his term. And Matt says, Carmelina's support of the war machine is bipartisan. It's pure evil what's happening in Yemen. I agree. It is pure evil. It's like, the Julian Assange prosecution is pure evil too. But pure evil. Not poor evil. Well-funded evil. But pure evil. Matarado says, how could you have inflation with so many people out of work and so much capacity unused? I don't know. I don't think you could. Independent Left says government primes the pump. From an MMT point of view, pump priming is no good. You have to be always, you have to be compensating for the leaks of demand in the economy. There are leakages to taxes, there are leakages to savings, and there are leakages to foreign trade because we're always running a current account deficit. So therefore, those leakages have to be made up with deficit spending, which adds net financial assets to the economy. So it's no good to have a pump priming thing, where you prime the pump and the economy does great for a while and then it collapses. You got to be compensating for the leakages continuously, all the time, in a very measured way. Not too great, but as much as the leakages from the economy do require, which may, by the way, be as much as 12% of GDP per year. That might be the appropriate deficit to be running, in a relatively healthy U.S. economy, which is not the one we have now, which may require much larger deficits. Matarado says we only have conservatives in both parties now. We only have greedy idiots in both parties now. Independent Left says Al Gore and Kucinich were as left as the Dems were for 25 years. Kucinich was a lot more radical than Al Gore. A lot more radical than Al Gore. Steve Wolfbrand said, you can't. Matt says, remember when TYT supported Liz as a true progressive? Yes, I do. The BCCC still supports her now as a true progressive. Independent Left said, yay, Bonnie, so did I. And Matarado says, yay, Bonnie. And Independent Left.news says, voted for the People's Party name. And Kay says, Medicaid is broken in Ohio too. Kim says, the movement for a People's Party. Oh, God, come on. I scroll down again. Here we go. Kim says, moves for a People's Party is what pushed forced the vote to re-elect um, uh, Nancy Pelosi for a floor vote with Jimmy, not too progressive. Yeah, that's what I thought. What I thought the People's Party was trying to do was to expose the people on the progressive side of the Democratic Party so that they could pick up the pieces. And 0110111102 says, no, Lee opposed the authorization for the use of military force. That's right. And 011102 says, Bernie voted for the authorization for use of military force, but against the Iraq war. So are you saying Lee did not vote against the Iraq war? Because I thought she did that too. Anyway. And Kay says, Ohio is a damn mess. And Rick Maynard said, thanks. Check your email. Sandy Degg says, howdy, Sandy. How are you?
I said hi.
And Bonnie says, hi.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Sandy. Lana says, the tone police wouldn't get far with this group. Sandy says, share. The Independent Left News says, Convo Catch fam here. Carmen says, I'm going to make a pot of fenugreek tea myself, having fever for several days. Sandy says, hope you feel better soon. Sandy Degg, thank you. Evelina says, have you been to the doctor, Carmen? Carmen says, Evelina, no medical, but thanks for asking. Joe, thanks so much for putting in the time to give us a good analysis. And I love your passion for social justice. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for coming. Carmen says, please do take care. Evelina says, Carmen, please do take care. Kay says, red states have no Medicaid here. Evelina Pond. Evelina says, you can get to a free clinic if you get a ride. Matt says, but Evelina, you're a good soul. Evelina said there are free clinics, though no. There are community health centers in certain areas of the country, but thanks to Bernie Sanders. And I think that they are close to free. I don't know, however, how possible it is to get service there now. They may be way overloaded with the crisis we have now. Steve Wolfbrand says, I have insurance that I pay a lot for. Okay, the doctor did an x-ray that cost $62. The insurance paid $12. Okay, I had to pay the rest, $50. What a scam. That is really a scam for old technology. X-rays, really old technology. They long since have paid for that effing equipment. Kay says, Florida's a major mess. Can't get seniors vaccinated even though they want to. Evelina says, you think it would cover all of it being expensive. Steve Wolfbrand, and you like those Republican talking points. People love their health insurance. Carmen says, Evelina, but Digi don't want to go where more sick people are, especially with the new COVID variant. I'd rather ride it out myself. Evelina says, Carmen, I can understand that, but you don't even know what you've got. Sorry, don't know where that DIGI typo came from. Carmen says, doesn't matter, I'm dying anyway. Carmen, that's awful. Yeah, you got to try to get some help. Kim says, I will never support the movement for a People's Party after how they handled forced the vote. Standing strong on only the floor vote lost people who wanted more. Well, we were there. We were tweeting. We were campaigning for more. We've been doing it now for 2 weeks. I guess I first started to post about this and tweet about this. It must have been December 13th, 14th, 15th. I've been doing it for more than 2 weeks now and working real hard at it. Kim says, replace Pelosi would have unified all of the left if MPP had included that in their plan. Yeah, it would have unified all of the left, and it might have gotten the squad to stand up and be counted. Steve said, what makes you say that? Mondaire Jones liked the tweet of someone thanking me for the videos I made for you, Joe. Is that a good sign? That's a good sign. That is a good sign. Let's see what he does, but tomorrow. Carmen says, Biden said he doesn't mind more survival checks when he gets in. Now, that's positive. Yeah, but who knows? They may be $600 survival checks. He might like more $600 survival checks. I mean, we're looking for $2,000 a month survival checks. He might be thinking, well, let's give him $600 a month survival checks. They'll be happy with that. It's a lot better than what they're getting now. At least over 9 months, they get $5,400 instead of getting zip. Jesus. Steve Gonzo says, Fauci says it's good for the new strain. Yeah, I think a number of people are saying they think it's going to be good for the new strain, but it remains to be seen. Independent Left says, hi, Kim, that's a good sign, but he's only one. There needs to be a coalition that speaks one voice. It was the video that shared suggestions for who could be speaker. He didn't like my tweet, but the response praising it. Evelina says, it is. Carmen Muniz, what's good about the new strain in Fauci's eyes? Kim says, Independent Left, yes, I'm wondering if we have any reason to think he might be one to speak up to the others. I don't know, but he might be one who would join with Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. I think Jamal and Cori are inclined to resist. If Mondaire is also inclined to resist, I think it would be easy to bring Rashida around then, and Ilhan too. And if we could get at least 5 of them, that's enough to block Pelosi if there are 434 votes. 5's enough to block her in that particular scenario. Even if the CIA 3 go over, 5's enough to block her. Steve says the vaccine is effective for the new strain. Evelina says Carmen Muniz, the vaccine. Matt says typically virus strains develop, but they mutate and make the virus more transmissible but less pathogenic. We'll see what happens with this one. Matt says, but the lobbyists are getting paid handsomely to be involved like this. How can you do that with children, work, health issues, guaranteed, etc.? Well, there are many more of us and very few lobbyists. So if we can take some little time out of each day, that's probably enough to compensate for the lobbyists. That's why it's so important that we get both a federal job guarantee and a basic income for people, because with both of those things, they would probably have the economic security to get involved for that amount of time. Kay says, we have to look at the job guarantee and basic income as ways of enabling people to be good citizens, active citizens. Look at it from that point of view, and not just from a purely economic advantage point of view, not even just from a pure inequality point of view, but as a necessary condition for people to really fully participate in society and the political system. Kay says, I've been paying attention to politics since age 15. Russ Goldman says, and Fred and Ted Cruz is a freaky, greedy, dominionist Christian type, I know. Matt says, Kate Clark, Ryan, gold star for you. I wasn't paying attention until college. Kay says, a different time back in the mid-'60s, Matt. Yep. And Kay says, wish I would have went to college back then. Would have been better than the choices I made. Evelina says, glad to know Rashida's there for the long haul. I think she is. I think she has a mission, and that mission is to get the Palestinians fair treatment. And I think she can do a lot more in Congress for that particular goal. And I think that is motivating her very strongly. And Kim says the vote is at 9 a.m. Yeah, that's when I think it has been scheduled. And Carmen says AOC probably wants to have a baby. I have that feeling that she does want to have a baby. But David Gomez says, she can have mine. She's pretty and smart. But Evelina says she has time. Biden says 2020. Evelina says Assange trial to decide extradition on the 4th, 2 days away. I know. And I don't know how to influence that at all. And it makes me very unhappy that, I'm not able to influence that. And David Gomez says Biden 2020. And Evelina says the Assange trial is 2 days away. Russ Coleman says almost 11:30. I enjoyed actually listening in, on YouTube, which, by the way, I have to ask you a question. And that particular question is, how many of you can listen in and watch when there's a YouTube live stream? And is that as good for you as a Facebook live stream? Or do you prefer Facebook for other reasons? I want to get a feel from you for all that. So if you'll leave this in the comments, I'd be grateful. Indy Left says, Gore was great on the environment. Yes, he was. Agreed, Kucinich was more radical. But Gore was in the Senate pushing for environmental policy when nobody else was. Yes, I agree. And I also agree, if Gore had the stones to fight for the presidency in 2000, we might have had an entirely different history now than we have had, because he would have pushed doing something about the climate, I think, right then. Right then. And I think, had he become the president, we might have had an entirely different kind of future than we had in the last 20 years. I think he would have been a far better president than George Bush. And Carmen says, in depth, and Dr. Joe is the bomb diggity. Sandy Dick said, Happy New Year, Joe, Bonnie, and everyone. Happy New Year to you, Sandy. It's wonderful to see you here. Carmen says, right, appointments at the community are hard to get. Kim says, I agree with your assessment of MPP, Joe. They want to pick up the pieces of the squad. But it seems to me that means they're putting their party before the people, just like Dems came Republicans. Kim, that's what political parties do. That's what they do. They become oligarchical very, very quickly. We have to have mechanisms in our political parties that ensure that they're ruled from the bottom up continuously. I know the kind of mechanism that's needed. I've written some, on this. I know exactly what's needed. The problem is, you need to get money in order to develop the software. And you also have to have initial patents for the software so that it can't be stolen by others who would exploit it for bad purposes. And you need someone to have the patent who basically will safeguard it for the public, a foundation of some kind. I don't know. Rick Maynard says, sent you a link on Facebook Messenger. You can join us on the air. Thank you, Rick. Okay, if I get off here on time, thanks. Carmen Mina says, I doubt if Biden wants to find a horse head in his bed if he does low on survival checks. Kay says, I'm already yawning, laugh out loud. Hey, Joe, you said on Twitter that you think Rashida is the boldest of the squad. I'm wondering why you think that, because our response to our campaign was, quote, just don't look at who is speaker, unquote. It's just her manner. I mean, it's just, she was involved in many demonstrations, okay, and many protests, and really an activist. And cops continuously had to drag her out of places because she was ready to put herself on the line for the people in her district continuously. That's why she got elected, because she was a real activist. Okay. And also, the ABC Act, the Automatic Boost to Communities Act that she wrote and that was introduced by Jayapal and herself, that was the boldest of the relief bills. That was the one worth the most. It would have delivered $2,000 a month to parents, to adults, every adult in the United States, $1,000 a month for children for the duration of the crisis, and 1 year afterwards, half as much for 1 year after the crisis, in order to give the economy time to recover. $1,000 for each adult and $500 for each child for a whole year afterwards, all to be deficit financed by using platinum coins. That was the best bill to come out of the Congress. Of course, it never got out of the Congress. It was the best bill to be put in Congress, by far. Okay, the best bill. She was willing to put that on the table and to push for it. There's nothing AOC has done that was as good as that. Independent said, Kim, I guess that's because she's been the most outspoken, brash, booing Hillary, impeached the mofo, etc. No, it's also due to her actions. Okay, it's also due to her background as a lawyer. She's a fighting lawyer. She's good. And Rahul Majumdar says, Pelosi, McConnell, vandalism, a shot across the bow. Whatever man says YouTube. Carmen Muniz says, I prefer FB, not a fan of YouTube. But Carmen, can you get YouTube? I mean, is it a problem for you to participate, on YouTube compared to Facebook? Sandy says, I have to check out YouTube. I think I get it on my TV, which would be awesome. Yeah, you can get it on your TV. That part is awesome, Sandy, but I don't think there's any way to make comments on TV. I mean, I'm always watching YouTube, but there's no way to interact. However, you can get it on your TV, and you can have it, playing on your TV, and you can have it on your computer, and you can be interacting on the computer. Just turn the sound off. Okay, and I think that works fine. And that is convenient. It's nice to have it on the big screen, certainly. Kay says, I prefer FB as I love to talk to the whole group. And she says, I don't comment, on YouTube. Right, but I think on YouTube you can also talk to the whole group. If it's a live stream, as long as it's a live stream, you can talk to the whole group on YouTube. And you can interact with the whole group too, I believe, in real time. Sandy said we can still comment on Facebook. I don't know how that would work. Okay, exactly. And Steve says, some prefer YouTube, others Facebook. I know. But the reason why I'm exploring this is because, okay, I now have the Zoom service. And Zoom, okay, is really good for people actually getting on Zoom and being able to verbally comment on Zoom or to participate with a camera on Zoom. So that's a big advantage, okay, of Zoom. And Zoom seems to also be better for sharing the screen, okay. So it's better from that point of view. But the problem with Zoom is currently, while I'm Zooming, I can only live stream to a single destination. I cannot do what I'm doing now, which is live streaming both to Facebook and to YouTube simultaneously. So that's why, okay, I'm asking. So I'm trying to find out, essentially what people are capable of doing. Okay, I want to try to be able to accommodate everybody. And so I need to know what you can do. Evelina says, you may be right, laugh out loud. It all seems somewhat forced, laugh out loud. Landy said, commenting on YouTube helps funds. No, it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't help fund my shows. Okay, at this time, I have to have 1,000 subscribers. Okay, then I can do super chats on that. But I didn't want to. I'm not so anxious to do super chats anyway. And the reason why I'm not so anxious to do that is because I don't want people to have to pay to make comments. I don't think that's good. In other words, it gets you to the point where your audience is only composed of people who can afford to pay to make comments. And I don't want to have that. I want people who can't afford to pay to be able to make comments also. Okay, whatever man says, if Gore fought for the presidency like Trump has, he would have won in 2000. If he fought for the presidency the way Bush had in 2000, he would have won. If he fought for the presidency in the way the Republicans and Bush had. I mean, the Republicans had a Brooks Brothers riot. Where was Gore's Brooks Brothers riot? Carmen said, oh, okay, thank you. Kim says, independent-left.news. Why do you think Rashida refused to say anything to challenge Pelosi's speakership? Well, okay, if they were planning to challenge her speakership, one way to do it was not to say anything about it. Just keep it among themselves. Keep it tight. Talk only to the people they absolutely trusted. And then, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, spring it on Pelosi. That would have been the proper way to do it. So that would mean when people asked them about it or inquired about it or pressured about it, from their point of view, the correct response was to deny anything like that was going on. Or to make it seem like, but nothing like that was going on. Yeah, Tlaib's mint the coin. Right. Except it's my mint the coin. But that's all right. I'm happy to have her want to mint the coin. I hope she gets to mint the coin. All the platinum coins she wants. Indy Left says, because she couldn't get enough people to go along with it. My guess is they all quietly decided together not to do this. Well, that's my guess too. But how can we tell? If they were going to spring something on Pelosi tomorrow morning, they certainly wouldn't be telling us about it, would they? So in other words, we're in the position where we have to blindly assume that they need to be persuaded to do this. And we have to do everything we can to try to pressure them and convince them to do it. And then hope that somewhere along the line, either they decided by themselves to do it or we did finally persuade them to do it. I've made the most logical case I can for this. I think it is persuasive. And people like them can understand it perfectly well. There isn't a slow boat in that whole bunch. So, they can understand it. If they don't want to do it, it's for reasons of their own or reasons that they understand some things about what's going on inside the Congress, which mean that even if all 8 of them stick together, they can't get away with it. They may know things, in other words, that I don't. Now, I'm not going to assume that if they don't say something later on. But at this point in time, I should say at this point, I'm not going to automatically assume bad faith on their part, because I like all of them too much for that. From what I've seen of them, they're the best thing to happen to Congress in a very, very, very long time. And I appreciate each of them, okay, as individuals. I'm sure that they're going to disappoint me very greatly tomorrow morning. But that's the chance you take. And Kim says, Star Pelosi. And Sandy Degg says, I would have to comment on my phone. Ah, I see. Carmen says, I think I can get by YouTube. I just never use it. Ah. And Raul says, there's a way to get funding from viewers on Facebook. Yes, I know. I've never tried that. Maybe I should. I mean, I have a funding source now. Okay, it's Patreon. Not many people take advantage of it. And I don't expect people who can't afford it to take advantage of it. Okay. Indy Left says, not with the Facebook group. Sandy says, yes, you can. Kay says, I keep my comments private on Facebook, Joe. You keep your comments private? How can you keep your comments private on Facebook, Kay? I mean, anybody can see the comments that you make in relation to this. Okay. So Rick said, okay, Johnny had to sign off, Joe. I'll hook up with you tomorrow. Okay, Rick. Great. Lana says, don't forget to subscribe here and hit the like button. In the left says, I can do Zoom to YT and Facebook with Restream.io, I believe. I know you can do that. I've tried to use Restream.io. I used to work with XSplit, and I would use Restream.io, and I found that it was somehow unreliable. I mean, it's not like StreamYard seems to work great with simultaneously streaming to YouTube and Facebook. But with Restream.io, I didn't find that. I was losing either one or the other. I don't know why. Carmen says, ultimately, it's your preference, Dr. Joe. Yeah, I know it's my preference, but okay. My preference is to stream to both outlets. That's the problem I'm trying to solve. That's the right solution for me. So that's what I'm trying to do. So Steve says, Tim Ryan asked about Nancy Pelosi continuing being Speaker Nancy Pelosi. In her defense, has protected us from some of the more liberal ideas in our party, which of course is just our trouble with her. Kim says, some shows only read the comments to the super chat comments. So they're letting the people with money dominate the conversation. Perhaps they could get something else for their donation. Yeah, actually on Patreon, they do get something else, okay, for their donation. There are some extra programs. There are gifts. There's swag, okay, various kinds, that you do on, Patreon. In my case, I could offer some free ebooks. I have plenty of free ebooks. I mean, I could make them free. They're not free at this point. Steve says, ugh. And Latina Pacia says, that's not true with Super Chats. Anyone can comment without paying. If they want to donate and make a comment, then they use the Super Chat. Oh, so what actually distinguishes the Super Chat then, Tina? Okay, Indy Left said, you can still choose to read all the comments, Joe. I think once you get to 1K, Super Chats are only for those who want to throw you a couple of bucks to support your work. Oh, thank you, Indy Left. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. So that's an argument for going to YouTube as long as people can still comment on it and can interact well, okay, on YouTube. Kim says, sounds like if they want to do this tomorrow, they've done everything correctly by not letting on so far. Laugh out loud. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I certainly would not have replied in any kind of favorable way to the People's Party idea, because that was not a risk that, to my mind, made any sense for them to take. Not after all the work they've done to get into Congress. Okay, and in the case of the first four, to stay in the Congress and to build a network of supporters, okay, and to start a PAC to help others to join them. They've done an amazing amount of work to get a mass movement of people built in behind them. Okay. And then to take the risk of throwing it all away on one single floor vote for Medicare for all in a very unfavorable situation? No, that's not a good trade-off. I mean, Jimmy Dore proposed a lousy trade-off. It wasn't in their interest. It wasn't in their supporters' interest. It wasn't in the interests of the progressives in the Democratic Party, or even in the progressives outside of the Democratic Party. It was only in the interest of the progressives who were part of the People's Party and who would like to see a stronger building up of the People's Party. I think it was a competitive move by the People's Party, not necessarily a move in the interest, okay, of everybody. And Barney is pushing her hand on the risk, which indicates that it's getting late, which I know that it is too. So anyway, I'm almost done, honey. It's just a few minutes now. Kim says, it sounds like if they want to do this tomorrow, they've learned corrupt by letting on corrupt cases. No surprise, Steve Gonzo, Dems in Ohio are GOP light. Carmen says, yeah, the art of war. Never let your opponent know which way you're coming in. Sandy Deck says, I thought if you add a commercial to your YouTube post to help to fund your broadcasts. Yeah, that could be. But of course, here, I have the Patreon account, which is advertised here. It's always on the screen, so people know where to go. Okay. Okay, I'm afraid I can't get into the mode of Jordan Chariton, who does his things, every 2 minutes. He's asking for a contribution. I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with Jordan. I like his work, and I watch him quite frequently, in fact. Okay, and I like his honesty and his hard work. Okay, but it's just, he feels comfortable doing the whole commercial thing all the time. And, I'm an old professor. I mean, that's who I am. It's not comfortable for me to do commercials all the time, especially not every 5 minutes. Like, you turn on TYT in Jenk, and really, every 5 minutes, the guy's doing a commercial. Kim says, you missed this one, Joe, but AOC, Bowman, and Corey challenged Pelosi? When did they challenge Pelosi? Kay says, only my friends see my comments on Facebook. Oh, I see, Kay. I see. That's what you do. I understand. Yeah, I see. Okay. And Deborah and Daniel Martinez Huerta says, you all want to look at some real shocking news the Chinese put out a few months ago and now released here on Facebook. I guess it was censored. Look at Underground Patriot. Chinese sent out videos of Hunter Biden, pedophile tapes, and Burisma. I promise you'll love it. Presidente Trump again. Comment is highlighted, says Tina, and it shows how much they donated. Sandy says the more comments on YouTube, the better. Sandy says that YouTube adds the commercial. Yeah, they do. I know they add the commercial. We don't share in any of the money from their commercials until we have 1,000 subscriptions. Steve says Jenk is always begging for money. Rob says, hey, Yoda, again. Hey, Rob, again. Rob Rivera. Sandy says, you wouldn't have to. Yeah, that's good. Carmen says, yeah, commercials are a problem for me. I don't watch TV because of it, plus my attention span for them is zip. Kim says, AOC said she has to go. Bowman and Corey refused to commit. For voting for her, you were saying the way to not let on would be to act like they're not voting, like they're voting for her, I think. Yeah. Okay, so AOC said she has to go. She has to go where? She has to go with what? I'm not understanding what you're saying, Kim. And Rob said, I ate and couldn't watch your stream. I'm sorry to hear it, Rob, but it'll be available on video. It's been a long stream. And Rahal says, even after pocketing $26 million, who's pocketing $26 million? And Steve says, good night, all. Yeah, I've come to the end. I'm going to say good night, all, too. Thank you for hanging in there so long. This has been a great conversation and a great stream. I enjoyed every minute of it, and you have made that possible. So thank you all very much. And I will be back on Tuesday. Hopefully now I'll get a chance to do some progressive short takes. I've been remiss on that because I've been so busy doing the tweeting and carrying on the Twitter campaign. So good night, everyone, and be well. And thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. Do not take any risks. COVID is terrible out there now. We're in the home stretch. Hopefully, most people will be vaccinated during the next 6 months or so. So I think we're in the home stretch. Take care of yourselves. I want to see you all here. And Carmen, you take good care of yourself too. Anthony says bye. Kay says thank you all. See you soon. Love you all. We love you, Kay. Good night.